Hi, this is my piano and my cat. I was playing the piano since I was 7, and I was really bad. 6 years of classical music, and it got to the point where the teacher told my mom, hey, look, maybe we should leave the boy alone. It's been nice. So my mom said, okay, and she switched the teacher again. And the next teacher actually changed my life. He introduced me to jazz. And in jazz, I found out very early on that I can make mistakes and it's okay. And like Ornette Coleman once said, it was when I found out I could make mistakes that I knew that I was onto something. I'm Ram. I'm from Red ID. I'm the CEO of Red ID. And at Red ID, we do products. We do digital products, and they are used all over the world. And the best products we made the most mistakes in. One of my favorite pianists is called Thelonious Monk. And he's kind of an expert. He sounds like he's making mistakes, but actually they're not mistakes, it's explorations. And he once went out of a concert he had, and he said, well, today I made the wrong mistakes. This shows us that not all mistakes are good. Mistakes are part of it, but not every mistake you make is good. It's actually promoting you forward. So what are the wrong mistakes? The first wrong mistake is mistake you already did. So if you keep on doing the same mistakes all over again, then you're doing something wrong. Usually it's because you don't acknowledge that you make a mistake. Second type of mistakes are mistakes that you can't learn from. It's okay to burn a cake, but if you didn't check what heat was the oven in and how much time did you put the cake in the oven, you can't learn from it and you probably burn the cake again. The third type of wrong mistakes are mistakes that you can't recover from. In 1982, Atari, the gaming company, came up with an idea for a game around E.T., the movie picture, and they negotiated the deal for a year. The negotiation went on and the release time did not move forward, and eventually the game designer, Howard Warshaw, had 3 weeks to design the game, and this was not enough time. The game was released with a lot of PR, and it was the biggest recall in game history. And the game was so bad, they had to actually bury all these games recalls in a dump site. Very shortly after, they had to close the company, fire everybody. And it was so bad that the entire gaming history saw a recession, a strong recession, and could not recover for years because of that bad mistake. So that's a mistake you cannot recover from. And you want to make sure when you make mistakes, there are not this type of mistakes. So how do you make the right mistakes? I want to introduce you to Jake Knapp, who's a friend and a mentor. And he worked at Microsoft on a project called Encarta. And Encarta was a CD-ROM cyclopedia. It had it was back in the 90s where they had CD-ROMs. It was a bunch of CD-ROMs and it was beautiful. It had multimedia and it had audio and it had images. It was wonderful. And every year they were working on a release and release it. It was very successful product. And then in 2001, they got this message saying, you better watch this site. It's pretty interesting, called Wikipedia. And they were looking at Wikipedia and saying, yeah, that's really cool idea, but we're more visual. Let's emphasize that. And they created a visual browser for their cyclopedia, yada, yada, yada. Time went by and the next release, Wikipedia already had more users, more titles, more items, and they had to close the entire project, and Jake was quite frustrated. So he decided he'd move to a better company, to Google. And in Google, he worked for a year and a half on a project that was also closed. And he started to be really, really frustrated, and he decided to dedicate the 20% of his free time in Google to create something that will prevent this to happen, working so long on a project that it's not relevant anymore when it's out. So looking at a typical design process looks like that, right? This is design thinking process. So you learn who you're designing for, you define the problem, you ideate, you find out many solutions, and then you prototype and then you test it. And typically it'll take you 3 to 6 months till users actually see what you designed, if you're good. But what happened is that as we start the project, everybody gets busy, right? A lot of busy work. And then because of that busy work, everybody's is waiting for each other. And eventually, because scopes change and the project change, a lot of the things we do just goes into the dump. And because of all the waiting and dumping of stuff you've already done, pretty soon we are all in project fatigue. We're not as excited about our project anymore. And Jake was looking at this cycle and was thinking, how can I prevent that? And he was looking at the process saying, okay, I have an idea, I'll build it, I'll launch it, I'll collect data, and then I'll fix my idea all over again. And he said, well, what's going on really is that the build takes a little longer than we thought, right? And then it takes even a little longer, and then it takes so long that we don't even see the launch anymore. And Jake was asking himself, what will happen if we cut the chase? We go directly from idea into collecting data from the users. And he called that a design sprint. And a design sprint is a process that in less than a week, we solve big challenges, we create new products, and we improve existing ones. And it compresses potentially months of work into a few days. So in a week, we'll go from ideating to prototyping to testing. So we have our idea tested by the end of the week by a real-looking prototype shown to users. So remember this? Now it's this. This is the week of the design sprint. So you can see that 2 days are spent on workshop and 2 days are prototyping and user testing. In the workshop days, we have the first day dedicated to defining the challenge and creating multiple solutions. The second day is dedicated to selecting a solution and defining the prototype. So on the third day, we take a bunch of designers and they design a wonderful, real-looking prototype. Now, it's very important it will look real because we don't look for user feedback. We're looking for desirability. We're looking for user reaction. And the difference is that we're not seeking professional advice from the users. We want to see if they actually want our product. So for the 2 days of workshop, we're going to bring all of the people, all of the key stakeholders in the project. Typically, in a startup, you'll bring the CEO, probably the VP of product, somebody from marketing, somebody that really knows the customers, like sales, customer support, and somebody from R&D. And you'd have a UX designer there and a facilitator. So around 7 people, sometimes it's 8 and 9, depending on the company politics. You want everybody that matters to this product be involved. Now, these 2 days, you already brought those key stakeholders into the room. You want to make sure this magic happens. So Jake wrote a very particular script of how to achieve this really condensed result. And there are 4 principles in his design. So the first principle is getting started is more important than being right. Getting started is more important than being right. This is crucial. If you run a year project, you're going to spend millions of it, you better be right. But if you're making a decision now and in a week we'll do user testing and we'll know, then that takes a way out of the decision making. And we can make a mistake. That puts us in an innovative state of mind. And that's exactly where you want to be when you're running a design sprint. Second principle is together alone. Meetings suck. Discussion is really, really a problematic dynamic in a group. People are talking, somebody takes over the conversation. In a sprint, we're not having any open discussion. Instead, we have a structured exercise, something like, what will success look like in 2 years' time? And we write, in 2 years' time, everybody writes on a note in 2 years' time and writes alone their idea of how success will look like. And then each one of the participants will show that note, explain it, and then we vote on it, and then we decide. So there's no open discussion, and you have time to think and write it down. Third principle is that we prefer tangible over discussions. So in a sprint, you'll have every 30 minutes timed, and you have a very strict outcome from each step. So you know that by progressing through the script, you have tangible outcomes you can take on in your product journey. And that gives you a lot of value and make sure that we are very productive along the way. Fourth principle is very strange coming from a design company, but it actually relieves us from the burden of bringing all the solution. We don't rely on creativity because everybody will be creative in this structured process where you have the room to be creative. So everybody, the R&D and the sales and the marketing, all of us are in charge and we own creativity, not only the creative people. So Jake took his ideas out of Google into Google Ventures. He tried this on hundreds of companies. And in 2016, he released a book. And since then, he and a lot of people around the world were practicing design sprints. So companies like Lego, Airbnb, Slack, Facebook, all of them use design sprints. It's a very validated system. And we know it's a script. It's not just a common philosophy. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through a case study of our process that we ran with one of our customers. The customer's name is Talenia. And Talenia had this great idea. They wanted to use veteran professionals and make them into headhunters, supplying them with candidates and clientele, and making them look through AI recruitment tools and hunt people that are willing to move to a new position. That was a great idea. However, the business side of it required them to make a hire, the company to make a hire for Talenia to get paid, like a recruitment agency. And that's a very difficult market to be in because you're very dependent on the time schedule and decision-making of hiring, which is a complex process. So they wanted to pivot from that idea. And the big idea was to utilize their current machine learning technology and to position themselves better against headhunting agencies using bots. They thought they would supply only sourcing procedures, finding the candidates, recommending them, and enable the employers directly selecting appropriate candidates and move them into the hiring funnel. So they called us and we did a sprint about that. I'm going to share with you the process and the results. So first day of the sprint, we defined the challenge. We start the day by doing an expert interview. In an expert interview, we interview the CEO or the sales manager, and we go through the user journey. We ask all participants to listen and to write down on notes whenever they hear a problem in the user journey. But we also ask them to phrase it in a very particular way, starting with the words, how might we? This is a method designed in Procter & Gamble, and it helps you focus on the challenge and also phrase it in such a way that you want to actually solve it. So for example, how might we create something that keeps HR in control? Actually, one of the top how might we's we had in the sprint. So after we do the interview, we have a lot of how might we's written by the team. And then we hang all of them on the wall, and we give each participant 3 dots, and they vote on the top 3 how might we's, the top 3 challenges they see in the user process. Eventually, we categorize the how might we's, and we decide on only 5 or 6 top how might we's to be used later. The next step is to select the long-term goal. We ask the participants to write down on a note a sentence that starts with the word "in 2 years' time," and then define how will success look like. Each participant will write it on a note, and eventually, after time's up, everybody presents their long-term goal, and we put them on a wall. We vote. Each participant gets 1 vote, and they vote on the sentence that most reflects what the vision of the company should be. We ask them to be very particular about the KPIs of how success will look like, not to be too general that it's not tangible. So in Talenia, it's in 2 years' time. Talenia is the go-to tool, which is a bit fluff, or service for hard-to-fill jobs. So this is a little focus we got. We don't want to focus on the entire hiring market, but we want to focus on hard-to-fill jobs. After we put on our very optimistic glasses on how success will look like, now we ask them to look in a pessimist manner and think of what will prevent us from getting to that long-term goal, and phrase it in a sentence that starts with the word "can we?" These questions are going to serve as our sprint questions. So we will build a prototype that should be able to answer these questions. So everybody writes their "can we?", the blockers for the long-term goals, and then we vote on that, and then we decide on the top 3. Everybody votes, and then the decider puts the 3 green dots on the winning "can we's". So this is not really democracy. It's just giving the decider tools to make informed-based decisions. This is what the team thinks, but not necessarily what he or she will decide. So in Talenia, we had 3 "can we's". Can we create a unique value out of our data? Because they're a data company, an AI company, and they want to show unique value. Can we overcome complexities by having HR provide some sample resumes? Can we simplify the project, the process of explaining what the job is? And the third one is, can we make the experience fully automated? This is a bit technical, but ideally we looked at it can be fully automated, and we wanted to also see if the clients will like that idea that everything is automated. Next step, we do the map. The map is a way of looking at the user journey. We divide the user journey into 3 parts: reach, how people will hear about us, which channels are we exposing ourselves to the users; learn, once they heard about it, how do they learn what we do; and use is actually the user experience. We do a very, very rough user experience map. This does not serve as a UX map. UX user map journeys are much more details. We try to be very high level, because the next thing we'll do, we'll take the how might we's we already wrote and prioritized, and we put them on the map. And that gives us an idea where are most of our challenges in the user journey. This really sheds light on where should we focus in our prototyping. And that's the next step. We ask the decider to select the type of user we're gonna prototype for, and where in the journey, circle out where in the journey will be a prototype addressing. In this case, the decider selected the hiring manager at the company we sell to, and the use, the way we are going to use the system. In many cases, in the design sprint, our prototyping outcome will be a landing page, because sometimes most of the challenge is just explaining what's the value proposition of the product. But Talenia wanted to examine the use part. Moving on to the second half of the day. The second half of the day, we produce mass solutions. So there's a very strict process we follow to produce solutions. We define the challenge, and now the first thing we're going to do is open our mind. In design thinking, there is diversion, we open our mind, and then conversion, focus on one solution. So the first step is diversion, lightning demos. We ask all of the team to look for solutions in the market, not necessarily in our domain, that solve similar problems. This helps us to look at different type of solutions that not necessarily is in our industry and enable us to open our mind to innovative ideas beyond what our competitors are doing. So we give 10 minutes to look at smartphones, do a small research, and then each one of the participants will show one or two ideas they think the team can explore. Next, we do a 4-part sketch. Sketching a solution is not easy for a lot of people, especially if they're not designers. So we funnel them, we help them go into that mood and ease that process. It sometimes feels pretty awkward to many participants, but we ease that. Sometimes we put music to ease that. The first step is note-taking. They go around the room and they just need to copy the long-term goal, the sprint questions, the how might we's, some of the lighting demos. This puts everybody in the mood of solving solution, moves our brain wheels a bit. Now we're in a solution solving state of mind. 15 minutes, just writing down notes, things I thought. I had the first half day is a lot to take. It's an opportunity to arrange my mind. Next, we give 20 minutes for doodling, just starting to form up an idea for a solution. It does not have to be very clear. Just let's look at the steps. Let's look at some of the text we can use here. You don't have to get to a full solution, but you start to have an idea of what's the direction of the solution you're going to get. 20 minutes for that. And then we do an exercise that should, again, open your minds. We fold a paper into 8 parts. We give 1 minute. This is why it calls crazy 8, because you don't give a lot of time for each part. 1 minute per square in the paper, and we force the participants to think of alterations to their doodling idea. Many people, when they start solving a solution and they have a solution, they're stopping because that's the first solution. They're so happy and they don't move forward. But usually the second or third iteration is much better. And we force them to go beyond their like, oh, I found the solution. No, think about a different idea. A minute for every idea, just to open our minds. That's a very useful exercise you can use out of the sprint. Just go beyond your initial idea. We finish that 8 minutes, and the next step is create a solution. We do a 3-part solution, 3 A4 pages. And what we ask them is to give a catchy title. Don't write their name. Solutions are anonymous. And in 3 steps, draw something that is communicative enough that I can look and understand the concept. It can be screens, and it also can be text or diagrams or drawings. It doesn't have to look attractive. It just needs to explain the core idea. After everything is hung on the wall, so we finish 40 minutes of drawing. We help participants to finish that. Staple each A4 on an A3 paper, so it's a little wider. Put Post-its to explain. Put a title, and then all of the solution hang on the wall. All are happy. We say, we high five, we drink beer, and we go home. So that's the first day. On the morning of the second day, we go through the solutions. Initially, we give each participant a bunch of dots, and they go through all the solution, and they just put points of interest. So we have a little heat map on the wall. After doing that, we know what's interesting. We go through each solution, but what we actually did is we forced everybody to read. Next, we go through each solution, and the facilitator present each one. Instead of relying on somebody being very dynamic and convincing, we make everything standardized. The facilitator will present all of the solutions. After each presentation, there's a question round, and then the person that did the solution can say a few words if she or she thinks something was not well understood. After going through that, we vote on the best solution, and then the decider looks at the voting and decide which of the solutions we're going to prototype. Usually, they use two of the solution and combine them. So I may take like part of this solution and the entire idea of that solution. So now we have a solution, we can move forward and define the prototype for the next day. The first exercise, we're going to do a user flow. So we ask the participant to think about the first screen they see or first step in the prototype, and then think about the end step, and then do the in-betweens. So what we get at the end is each participant will have 6 notes showing what are the screens we're going to prototype the day after. And then we vote on that and decide again, and we agree on what's the path for the prototype. And that will bring us to the storyboard. At this point, we enable some of the participants to go because we don't need everybody. It's more the product people and the marketing people. And we sit together and we actually draw the screens on a whiteboard. So everything is very clear on how things will look like tomorrow, and we will be independent to work out the prototyping with the design team. High five, drinks, go home. The next day, we're prototyping. I'm going to show you the prototyping we did for Telenia. You'd see these are real looking screens. These were prototyped in one day and were shown to users. This is the actual design. So you can see how realistic they look because we are expecting the users to react. You got a glimpse, okay? This is pretty detailed. We had like 15 screens in the prototype. We had 3 designers working on it for a full day. You don't care about this to be particularly accurate. It's not the final design. We just wanted to bring that to users and understand if this is desirable. After we created the prototype, and that's a full day, we are going to interview 5 users. In the interview, we show them the prototype and we actually listen. There are very few questions we ask during that prototyping, that's user testing. We just show them the prototype and ask them to openly speak up what they think. And you'd be surprised how much information you're getting just from letting them see, click, and talk. You don't need to ask. So you had a glimpse into a design sprint, you got an overview about it, and how do we make the right mistakes? The right mistakes requires you to first know the wrong mistakes. Making the right mistakes requires you to find a good framework, like design sprints, something that you can repeat. Third thing is you need to take your risks based on data instead of guessing. So this concludes my presentation. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope you remember that the only cat that's worth anything are cats that takes chances. Happy to see you in the Q&A. Bye-bye.